Have you ever stopped to wonder why certain stories from the ancient world still capture our imagination today? Tales like the lost city of Atlantis, the fountain of youth, or the mythical creatures said to roam uncharted lands. These legends have persisted for centuries, woven into the fabric of cultures across the globe. But here's the fascinating part. Many of these myths aren't just flights of fancy. They often contain kernels of truth, hints of real historical events, or even early attempts to explain natural phenomena that science would later unravel. That's where the line between fact and fiction becomes thrillingly blurry, and that's exactly what we're diving into today. Think about it. Why do these stories endure? It's not just because they're entertaining. They speak to something deeper in us, a longing to understand the unknown, to solve mysteries that have puzzled humanity for generations. Take Atlantis, for example. Plato first described this advanced civilization over 2,000 years ago, and yet archaeologists and historians are still searching for evidence of its existence. Could it have been inspired by a real ancient city swallowed by the sea? Or consider the Fountain of Youth, a legend so powerful it drove explorers to traverse uncharted oceans. Today, scientists study the biology of aging, asking questions that echo those ancient dreams of immortality. These myths aren't just relics of the past, they're mirrors reflecting our endless curiosity. In this video, we're going on a journey to explore the science behind these timeless myths. We'll sift through the layers of legend and lore to uncover what's real, what's plausible, and what might forever remain a mystery. Along the way, you'll discover how modern archaeology, cutting-edge technology, and groundbreaking research are shedding new light on age-old stories. From buried cities to genetic clues hidden in our DNA, the tools of science are giving us fresh ways to test these ancient tales. So, if you've ever wondered whether there's truth behind the myths, or if you just love a good historical mystery, you're in the right place. Let's separate fact from fiction and see where the evidence leads us. The answers might surprise you. Long before we had telescopes to study the stars or microscopes to examine cells, humans turned to storytelling to make sense of the world around them. Picture our ancestors sitting around a fire, gazing up at a sky lit by lightning, and wondering what force could create such power. Without the tools of modern science, they crafted explanations that resonated on a deeply human level. Maybe it was Zeus hurling thunderbolts or Thor swinging his mighty hammer. These weren't just fanciful tales, they were humanity's first attempts at science, using narrative to fill the gaps in understanding. This instinct to explain the unknown through myth isn't just about curiosity, it's woven into the very fabric of how we think. Psychologist Carl Jung proposed the idea of the collective unconscious, a shared mental library of symbols and stories that appear across cultures, from dragons to flood myths. Joseph Campbell took this further with his concept of the hero's journey, showing how myths follow universal patterns that reflect our deepest fears and aspirations. Whether it's the Greek story of Persephone explaining the seasons or the Aboriginal Dreamtime tales mapping the land, these narratives served as early frameworks for understanding life's biggest questions. But myths did more than just explain, they comforted. Imagine living in a world where earthquakes could strike without warning, or eclipses seemed to swallow the sun whole. By attributing these events to gods or spirits, people regained a sense of control, however symbolic. Norse legends told of the wolf skull chasing the sun, creating eclipses when he nearly caught it. The Maya saw Venus not just as a planet, but as a god signaling war or harvest. These stories transformed chaos into order, offering reassurance in the face of the unpredictable. Today, we might smile at the idea of storms being caused by a sky god's anger, but the impulse behind these myths hasn't disappeared. Modern science, in many ways, is our latest chapter in this age-old quest for understanding. Instead of invoking deities, we now use satellites and seismometers, but the drive to unravel mysteries remains the same. And here's the twist: sometimes science circles back to these ancient tales, discovering grains of truth hidden in the folklore. Could the legend of a great flood trace back to real glacial melts? Might tales of Cyclops have originated from fossilized elephant skulls, their central nasal cavity mistaken for a single eye? As we peel back the layers of these stories, we're not just decoding the past, we're seeing how myth and science are two sides of the same coin. Both seek to answer the question that has haunted humanity since we first looked up at the stars: how does the world work, and where do we fit into it? Archaeology has become one of our most powerful tools for untangling the threads of myth and reality. Take Heinrich Schliemann, the 19th century businessman turned amateur archaeologist who was obsessed with proving Homer's epic poems weren't just fiction. Against all skepticism, he dug into the hills of modern-day Turkey and uncovered the ancient city of Troy, not just a legend, but a real place with layers of warfare matching Homer's descriptions. His discovery sent shockwaves through the academic world, proving that even the most fantastical stories could have roots in historical events. But not every legend survives the test of the shovel. For centuries, explorers braved jungles and mountains in search of El Dorado, the mythical city of gold. Spanish conquistadors drained lakes and hacked through rainforests, convinced they'd find untold riches. Yet modern archaeology tells a different story. What they were really chasing was likely the Muisca people's ritual where a chief covered himself in gold dust and dove into a sacred lake, a ceremony twisted over time into a tale of a golden city. It's a perfect example of how myths can snowball, transforming cultural practices into exaggerated legends. Today's archaeologists have tools Schliemann couldn't have dreamed of. Radiocarbon dating lets us pinpoint the age of artifacts with astonishing precision, separating fact from folklore by placing objects in their true historical context. Then there's LiDAR, a laser mapping technology that's revolutionized how we search for lost civilizations. By peering through dense jungle canopies, researchers have uncovered entire Mayan cities hidden for centuries, settlements that might have inspired tales of mysterious, advanced societies. Even deep underwater, sonar and submersibles are probing shipwrecks and submerged ruins, testing legends like Atlantis with hard evidence. Sometimes the truth behind myths is stranger than fiction. In the fossil record, scientists have found peculiar arrangements of giant squid-like creatures with broken vertebrae, arranged in patterns that suggest deliberate placement. Could these be the remains of a real-life kraken, a massive cephalopod that ancient sailors exaggerated into a ship-swallowing monster? It's a tantalizing possibility, showing how even the wildest tales might stem from real, observable phenomena. As technology advances, so does our ability to revisit old stories with fresh eyes. Ground-penetrating radar uncovers buried structures without disturbing a single stone, while DNA analysis traces the movements of ancient peoples who might have carried myths across continents. Every excavation, every scan, every lab result adds another piece to the puzzle, helping us see these age-old stories not just as fables, but as reflections of humanity's attempts to explain their world. And with each discovery, we're reminded that the line between myth and history is often thinner than we think. The same tools that power modern medicine and space exploration are now cracking open ancient myths, revealing truths hidden for millennia. Take DNA analysis. Scientists examining bones from Crete discovered a genetic disorder in ancient remains that causes extra bone growth in the skull, potentially explaining the Minotaur legend. Imagine a child born with unusual skeletal features in a society that worshipped bulls. Over generations, that real medical condition could have transformed into the tale of a monstrous half-man, half-bull lurking in a labyrinth. Then there's the science of geochemistry, turning mythical magic springs into fascinating natural phenomena. For centuries, places like Delphi's Castalian Spring were believed to grant prophetic visions. Modern testing shows many of these sacred waters contain ethylene, a gas with psychoactive properties that can induce trance-like states. Suddenly, the Oracle of Delphi's mysterious pronouncements make new sense, not as divine messages, but as chemical interactions between the spring's vapors and human biology. From orbit, satellites are rewriting history by spotting what the naked eye can't see. Infrared imaging revealed the lost city of Ubar beneath Oman's desert sands, a place long dismissed as pure fantasy from Arabian Nights tales. The same technology has mapped ancient trade routes in the Sahara, showing how real caravans might have inspired legends of phantom cities appearing and disappearing in the dunes. These aren't just dots on a map, they're proof that oral traditions often preserve geographical truths across hundreds of generations. What's most exciting is how different fields are colliding to solve these puzzles. Geneticists tracing the spread of plague bacteria through Viking remains might explain stories of cursed burial mounds. Geologists studying sediment layers in the Black Sea have found evidence supporting flood myths from Mesopotamia to Greece. Even linguists are contributing, using AI to reconstruct dead languages and decode inscriptions that mention mythical events alongside verifiable kings and battles. But here's where it gets provocative. Every new discovery challenges assumptions. The griffin, a mythical creature with a lion's body and eagle's head, was long thought to be pure imagination, until paleontologists realized its description perfectly matches Protoceratops fossils exposed in Central Asian gold mines. Suddenly, a fantasy creature becomes a plausible case of ancient humans interpreting dinosaur bones. Similarly, the Cyclops myth may originate from dwarf elephant skulls found on Mediterranean islands, their large nasal cavities resembling single eye sockets. These breakthroughs force us to reconsider how we label stories as myth or history. When satellite imagery confirms a city described in an epic poem, or DNA links a hero's lineage to actual Bronze Age rulers, the division between fact and folklore blurs. Perhaps the real magic lies not in the stories themselves, but in how modern science allows us to recover the truths they've carried across time. Flood stories appear in nearly every ancient culture, from the biblical account of Noah to Mesopotamia's epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero Utnapishtim builds a massive boat to survive divine punishment. The Aztecs spoke of a world drowned by the wrath of the rain god Tlaloc, while Aboriginal Australians preserved tales of ancestral spirits unleashing floods to cleanse the land. Even in China, the legend of Gun and Yu tells of a hero taming catastrophic waters with divine help. What's striking isn't just the similarity of these stories, it's how they echo real geological events that shaped human history. Geologists point to moments like the Black Sea deluge hypothesis, where around 7,000 years ago, rising global seas may have burst through the Bosporus, flooding a vast freshwater lake and turning it into the salty Black Sea overnight. For farming communities along those shores, such an event would have been apocalyptic, leaving survivors to pass down warnings of divine wrath for generations. Similarly, meltwater pulses at the end of the last ice age could have sent tsunamis crashing into coastal settlements worldwide, explaining why flood myths appear in cultures separated by oceans. These weren't just moral fables, they were oral records of environmental trauma etched into collective memory. But why floods? Unlike earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, floods leave fertile soil in their wake, creating a paradox of destruction and renewal that resonates deeply with agrarian societies. The Nile's annual inundations brought life to Egypt, while the Tigris and Euphrates' unpredictability demanded respect in Mesopotamia. Floods became symbols of both divine punishment and rebirth, a theme reflected in rituals like Bali's Melasti, where statues are purified in seawater to wash away spiritual corruption. Science now lets us test these narratives. Sediment cores from the Persian Gulf reveal layers of saltwater intrusion matching Sumerian flood timelines, while tree rings in the Americas show abrupt climate shifts that could have inspired deluge legends among the ancestral Puebloans. The real intrigue lies in separating shared human experience from actual events. Did flood myths spread through cultural exchange, or did disparate communities independently record similar catastrophes? Genetic studies of population bottlenecks suggest some truth. Around 12,000 years ago, human numbers plummeted, possibly due to climate upheavals like rapid sea level rise. Yet the symbolic power of water transcends disaster. In Hinduism, the god Vishnu sleeps on the cosmic ocean, and floods appear not just as punishment but as part of creation's cyclical rhythm. As we turn from earthly waters to the heavens, another universal theme emerges: celestial myths that transformed comets into omens and eclipses into battles between light and darkness. But that's a story written in the stars. Ancient civilizations didn't just tell stories about the earth, they looked up at the night sky and saw a canvas for their greatest myths. The stars weren't mere points of light. They were gods, heroes, and omens woven into constellations that still bear their names today. Take Orion, the mighty hunter of Greek lore, forever chasing the Pleiades across the heavens. But there's a twist. Some researchers now believe this myth might preserve the memory of a real cosmic catastrophe. Around 12,000 years ago, evidence suggests a fragmented comet may have struck Earth, triggering wildfires and climatic upheaval. Could the Greeks have passed down a distorted recollection of this event, turning celestial violence into a tale of a hunter eternally pursuing his prey? The timing aligns eerily with the Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to Ice Age conditions that reshaped human civilization. Eclipses, too, were more than celestial spectacles. They were moments of cosmic drama that terrified and inspired. The ancient Babylonians, meticulous record keepers of the skies, detected a pattern. Eclipses recurred in cycles of approximately 18 years, a period they called the Saros cycle. This wasn't just academic curiosity, it was survival. Kings relied on these predictions to avoid panic when the sun disappeared, and myths like the Hindu demon Rahu swallowing the sun emerged to explain these terrifying intervals. Even today, cultures worldwide preserve eclipse rituals, from banging pots in India to releasing the sun, to Navajo traditions of stillness and reflection during these celestial events. Then there are the monuments. Stonehenge's towering stones aren't just a feat of ancient engineering. They're a prehistoric astronomical calculator. During solstices, sunlight pierces through the structure's key alignments with uncanny precision, suggesting its builders tracked the sun's movements with astonishing accuracy. Similar patterns emerge globally. The Mayans built El Caracol with windows aligned to Venus's extremes, while Egypt's Great Pyramid shafts point to Orion's belt. These weren't coincidences, they were deliberate attempts to marry earth and sky, to encode celestial knowledge into stone. But the heavens didn't just inspire architecture, they birthed legends of supernatural beings. The Maori tell of Tohaki, a demigod who climbed the sky on a celestial vine, while Norse myths describe the rainbow bridge Bifrost linking realms. Even the auroras, those shimmering polar lights, became spectral warriors or dancing spirits in Sami and Inuit traditions. Today, we know these phenomena stem from solar particles colliding with Earth's atmosphere, but that scientific explanation doesn't dim their magic. Instead, it deepens our appreciation for how our ancestors transformed the cosmos's mysteries into stories that still resonate. As we piece together these celestial puzzles, we're reminded that every myth holds a question, and sometimes science offers an answer written in the stars. Dragons have soared through human imagination for millennia, appearing in cultures from medieval Europe to ancient China. But where did these fire-breathing behemoths come from? The answer might lie beneath our feet. In China's Gobi Desert, farmers unearthed massive bones with long, serpentine shapes, remains that paleontologists now recognize as dinosaurs like the sauropod. To ancient people encountering these fossils, what else could they be but the skeletons of dragons? The Chinese even had a name for them: dragon bones, grinding them into medicine for centuries before science revealed their true origin. This wasn't isolated to Asia. In Greece, the giant bones of extinct mammals found in limestone caves were interpreted as the remains of fallen titans, blurring the line between myth and prehistory. The griffin, that majestic eagle-lion hybrid of Persian legend, tells a similar story. For years, scholars puzzled over its origin until a breakthrough came from an unexpected place: the fossil-rich sands of the Gobi. There, Protoceratops skeletons lie scattered like ancient puzzles, their beaked skulls and four-legged bodies bearing an uncanny resemblance to griffin descriptions. Scythian nomads who traded along the Silk Road likely encountered these fossils and spun them into tales of gold-hoarding creatures, explaining why griffin art first appeared in regions where these fossils surface. It's a perfect example of how ancient peoples interpreted the natural world through the lens of their own experiences, creating myths to explain the unexplainable. Then there are the creatures that refuse to stay in the realm of pure fantasy. Take the Loch Ness Monster, Scotland's most famous cryptid. Sonar scans of the deep, peat-stained waters have repeatedly come up empty, while environmental DNA studies found no traces of unknown reptiles, just eels and fish. Yet the legend persists, showing how our brains are wired to see patterns, even in random waves or floating logs. Paleontology offers another angle. Could Nessie be a cultural memory of when ancient Britons stumbled upon plesios or fossils, projecting those shapes onto their murky lakes? Modern science hasn't just debunked myths, it's given us tools to understand why they endure. CT scans reveal how a mammoth skull's central nasal cavity could resemble a cyclops' single eye, while isotopic analysis of unicorn horns in medieval collections exposed them as narwhal tusks. Each discovery peels back another layer, showing how our ancestors transformed real, if misunderstood, natural phenomena into enduring legends. As we shift from creatures to the humans who imagined them, consider this: every myth is a mirror, reflecting not just what our ancestors saw, but how they saw it. Their stories weren't lies, they were the best explanations available in a world where bones could be dragons and comets were portents. In that sense, myth-making isn't so different from science. Both are attempts to make sense of a mysterious universe, just with different tools. And sometimes, as with those Protoceratops fossils whispering through time as griffins, the truth turns out to be more fascinating than the fiction. The quest for eternal life is one of humanity's oldest obsessions, woven into myths from every corner of the globe. The fountain of youth, said to restore youth to anyone who drinks its waters, lured explorers like Ponce de Leon into the jungles of Florida. The philosopher's stone, coveted by alchemists, promised not just infinite wealth but the secret to endless life. These weren't just whimsical tales, they reflected a deep, universal longing to conquer time. Today, science has taken up that same quest, but instead of searching for magical springs, researchers are peering into our cells, studying telomeres, the protective caps on our DNA that shorten as we age. Experiments show that lengthening these telomeres in lab animals can extend their lifespans, sparking debates about whether we're inching closer to the ancient dream of immortality. But immortality myths weren't just about biology, they were also about transformation. Alchemists spent centuries mixing metals and elixirs, convinced they could distill the essence of eternal life. While their methods were flawed, their intuition wasn't entirely wrong. Modern science has found that certain compounds, like rapamycin, can slow aging in mice by mimicking the effects of caloric restriction, a practice linked to longevity in cultures from Okinawa to the Mediterranean. Even the myth of vampirism finds an eerie parallel in today's plasma transfusion studies, where older mice show renewed vitality after receiving blood from younger counterparts. It's as if the old tales were grasping at truth science is only now confirming. Yet there's a crucial difference between myth and reality. Legends often portray immortality as a blessing, but science reveals its complexities. Telomerase, the enzyme that repairs telomeres, is also hyperactive in cancer cells, hinting at the delicate balance between longevity and disease. And while caloric restriction extends lifespan in lab animals, it's hardly a fountain of youth, more a grueling discipline of moderation. Even the most cutting-edge biotech, like gene editing or senolytics, aims not for endless life but for health span, more years of vitality, not just more years. This shift from myth to science changes how we view aging itself. Ancient cultures often saw it as a curse or divine punishment, but modern research frames it as a biological process we might one day influence. The irony: some of the most promising anti-aging strategies echo age-old wisdom. Mediterranean diets rich in olive oil resemble alchemists' elixirs, while practices like meditation, once thought to purify the soul, now show measurable effects on stress hormones and cellular aging. As we move from timeless bodies to timeless cities, another set of myths awaits those of lost civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria. These tales speak not just to a fear of death, but to a fear of being forgotten, of entire cultures swallowed by time. And just as science is testing immortality myths, it's also uncovering surprising truths beneath these legends of vanished worlds. Plato's account of Atlantis reads like something straight out of epic fantasy, a mighty island empire, rich in gold and advanced technology, that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night of catastrophe. He described concentric rings of land and water, towering temples, and a civilization so powerful it even attacked ancient Athens before the gods punished its hubris. But here's the twist: Plato insisted this wasn't just a fable. He claimed the story came from Egyptian priests passed down for generations. So, was Atlantis pure invention, or could it have been inspired by real events? One compelling theory points to the Minoan civilization on Crete, a seafaring culture that thrived until around 1600 BC. The island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, was home to a volcanic eruption so massive it dwarfed Krakatoa. Ash clouds blotted out the sun, tsunamis ravaged coastal cities, and the Minoans' once great palaces collapsed. To survivors or distant observers, this sudden destruction might have morphed into tales of an entire kingdom swallowed by the sea. Even the Minoans' advanced architecture, multi-story buildings with plumbing and vibrant frescoes, echoes Plato's description of Atlantis' sophistication. Then there's Doggerland, a vast plain that connected Britain to mainland Europe until rising seas drowned it around 6,000 years ago. underwater surveys reveal hills, rivers, and even evidence of human settlements beneath the North Sea. Could memories of this drowned world have persisted in oral traditions, eventually reaching Plato through trade networks? The timing aligns with another clue. Plato placed Atlantis' demise 9,000 years before his time, roughly the same epoch as Doggerland's submergence. Modern geology adds another layer to the mystery. Plate tectonics tells us continents don't just sink overnight, but catastrophic events like methane explosions or underwater landslides could make landmasses vanish rapidly. In 2016, researchers off the coast of Brazil discovered a granite formation deep underwater, a rock that typically forms on land. Could this be a remnant of a lost landmass or just a quirk of geological upheaval? Underwater archaeology is rewriting what we know about submerged civilizations. Sonar mapping has uncovered sunken cities like Egypt's Heracleion and India's Dwarka, proving that coastal settlements did succumb to rising waters. Each discovery fuels the question, if these places were real, why not Atlantis? The search itself reveals something profound. Our fascination isn't just about finding a lost city. It's about the tantalizing idea that advanced societies might have risen and fallen long before recorded history, leaving only echoes in our oldest stories. And Atlantis is just the beginning. From the jungle-shrouded ruins of El Dorado to the rumored citadels of the Sahara, the Earth still holds secrets that blur the line between legend and history. Perhaps that's why these tales endure not as literal truths, but as invitations to keep exploring, to keep questioning what might lie hidden beneath the waves or the sands of time. The legend of El Dorado didn't begin as a city of gold. It started with a man. High in the Andes, the Muisca people performed a breathtaking ritual. Their newly crowned leader, covered head to toe in gold dust, would paddle to the center of Lake Guatavita on a raft laden with treasures. As priests chanted, he'd plunge into the icy waters, washing off the gold while attendants threw emeralds and golden figurines into the lake as offerings. To the Muisca, this wasn't about wealth. It was a sacred act of balance, returning precious metals to the earth that provided them. But when Spanish conquistadors heard fragments of this tradition, their imaginations ignited with visions of a golden city waiting to be plundered. Gold held very different meanings for these two cultures. For the Muisca, it was a spiritual medium, a way to connect with the gods. Their masterful goldsmiths crafted intricate pendants and nose rings not to hoard, but to wear in ceremonies, believing the metal's luminous glow mirrored the sun's divine energy. Modern metallurgy reveals why gold captivated them. Its resistance to tarnish made it seem eternal, while its malleability allowed artisans to create feather-thin sheets that caught the light like sunlight on water. The Spanish, however, saw only currency. Their obsession wasn't just greed, it was alchemy's promise that gold represented perfection, a metal they believed could even prolong life if consumed as aurum potabile. This cultural clash sparked one of history's most relentless treasure hunts. Conquistadors like Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada drained lakes with buckets, while later expeditions used crude dynamite to blast openings in Lake Guatavita's rim, irreparably damaging the sacred site. None found the fabled riches, but their failures didn't kill the dream. In the 1960s, a team using modern pumps unearthed a handful of gold artifacts before their equipment collapsed into the mud, a stark lesson in how myth often outpaces reality. The El Dorado legend reveals a pattern we've seen before, how easily rituals transform into rumors, then into obsession. Modern treasure hunters still scan South American jungles with ground-penetrating radar, convinced some undiscovered golden metropolis awaits. Yet archaeologists now understand that the real treasure was the Muisca's sophisticated culture all along, their intricate gold work, their celestial calendars carved into stone, their trading networks spanning the continent. The true gold was knowledge, not metal. This shift from seeking objects to understanding their creators brings us to another category of legendary artifacts, objects imbued with such mystery that their very existence straddles the line between history and fantasy. From the Ark of the Covenant to Excalibur, these items carry stories that transcend their material form. The Holy Grail isn't just a cup, it's an idea that shape shifted across centuries, transforming from a sacred relic into something far more elusive. In medieval romances like Creation de Troyes, Percival, the Grail wasn't yet the cup of Christ. It was a mysterious, glowing dish carried by a maiden, hinting at Celtic myths of magical cauldrons. But by the time Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote Parzival, it had become the lapsit exilis, a stone fallen from heaven. The Grail's fluid symbolism reflects something profound. Humans don't just search for objects, we search for meaning. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the Grail takes on a new life in archaeology. The Valencia chalice, a simple agate cup kept in Spain's Cathedral of Valencia, became a prime candidate after carbon dating placed it between 300 BC and 300 CE, potentially the right era for the Last Supper. But here's the catch: the Grail's earliest legends never describe its appearance. The Valencia chalice's claim rests on tradition, not hard evidence, showing how easily faith and fact intertwine in these quests. Other contenders, like the Antioch chalice or Genoa's Sacro Catino, reveal the same pattern. Artifacts gain Grail status through stories, not provenance. Yet the Grail's power lies beyond archaeology. For Jungian scholars, it represents the collective unconscious's yearning for wholeness, a symbol of spiritual completion. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland paints it as a metaphor for post-war disillusionment, while Indiana Jones reframes it as a test of humility. Even modern conspiracy theories tie it to bloodlines or alien technology, proving its adaptability. The Grail isn't an object to find. It's a mirror showing what each era values most. But every legendary artifact carries shadows. Grail seekers often face tales of curses, guardians struck blind, or dynasties crumbling after claiming the cup. These stories aren't just superstition, they're warnings about obsession. Historians note how Grail mania fueled the Crusades' plunder of Constantinople, while fringe theorists still stalk French castles, convinced they're one clue away from glory. The real curse might be the Grail's ability to warp time, making centuries feel like moments in its endless chase. From myth to metaphor, the Grail's journey reveals a universal truth: the treasures we hunt say more about us than the past. And as we'll see, that lesson echoes in the darker legends, the ones where artifacts don't just evade discovery but retaliate. The so-called Curse of the Pharaohs surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb reveals more about human psychology than ancient magic. When Howard Carter opened the burial chamber in 1922, newspapers spun tales of a deadly inscription warning that death shall come on swift wings to those who disturb the king's rest. Over the next decade, several expedition members died under unusual circumstances. Lord Carnarvon from an infected mosquito bite, financier George J. Good from pneumonia after visiting the tomb. The public connected these tragedies into a narrative of supernatural vengeance, ignoring the dozens of others involved who lived to old age. This selective pattern seeking is classic confirmation bias, our tendency to remember hits and forget misses when testing a belief. Modern psychology offers another explanation: the nocebo effect, where negative expectations manifest as real physical symptoms. Studies show that when people believe they've been exposed to something harmful, even if it's inert, their bodies sometimes react with pain, nausea, or weakness. Applied to Tutankhamun's curse, the power of suggestion becomes deadly. Archaeologists working in the stifling, dust-choked tomb might have subconsciously expected misfortune, priming their immune systems to fail against otherwise minor infections. Even Carnarvon's death aligns with this. His existing poor health combined with the stress of constant media scrutiny likely worsened his condition. But not all cursed artifacts rely on psychology alone. The Hope Diamond, with its trail of alleged misfortune from Louis XVI to heiress Evelyn Walsh McLean, was revealed to be partly a publicity stunt. McLean herself admitted embellishing stories to boost the diamond's mystique, while historians note many victims actually died from commonplace causes like old age or the French Revolution. The real curse, human nature's love for dramatic narratives that override statistical reality. These cases highlight a fascinating divide between perception and evidence. For every cursed object like the debunk box, a wine cabinet supposedly haunted by a malicious spirit, scientists find mundane explanations like mold spores causing headaches. Yet the stories persist because they tap into something primal, our fear of the unknown and the comforting idea that the universe operates on moral rules where trespasses are punished. As we move from cursed objects to mythic places, this psychological lens becomes even more revealing. Whether it's the Bermuda Triangle's disappearances or the eerie silence of the Zone of Silence in Mexico, these locations show how easily geography can become legend when mystery outpaces explanation. The line between land and lore is often just a matter of interpretation and sometimes a trick of the mind. High in the Himalayas, where the air thins and the world seems to pause, lies the legend of Shangri-La, a hidden valley where time stands still and peace reigns eternal. The name itself conjures images of mist-shrouded monasteries, ageless sages, and a paradise untouched by the outside world. But where did this myth begin? Its roots stretch back to Tibetan Buddhist teachings about Baal, secret sacred valleys hidden by mystical forces, accessible only to the pure of heart. These weren't just physical places, they were spiritual refuges promised to appear during times of chaos. Fast forward to 1933, when British author James Hilton reimagined this concept in his novel Lost Horizon, introducing Shangri-La to the Western world as a utopian sanctuary where people lived for centuries, free from war and decay. Hilton's fictional creation tapped into a universal longing, a place where humanity's flaws couldn't reach. The real-world parallels are just as fascinating. Nestled in the remote mountains of Pakistan, the Hunza people became synonymous with Shangri-La's myth after reports emerged of their extraordinary longevity and vibrant health. Early 20th century travelers marveled at elders who climbed mountains well into their 90s, attributing their vitality to the valley's pristine air, mineral-rich water, and apricot-heavy diet. Scientists later debunked the extreme longevity claims. Birth records were scarce, and ages were often exaggerated, but the allure persisted. Why? Because the Hunza represented something deeper, the idea that isolation could preserve purity, that somewhere on Earth, a community thrived untouched by modernity's stresses. Geography plays a starring role in these utopian myths. Isolated valleys, encircled by towering peaks or impenetrable jungles, naturally invite speculation about what or who might lie within. The Amazon's El Dorado, the Andes' Paititi, even the Greek Hyperborea, all are framed by landscapes so forbidding they become blank canvases for our imaginations. Psychologists call this terra incognita bias, our tendency to project hopes onto unmapped spaces. Before satellites peeled back Earth's mysteries, these blank spots on the map were perfect for dreaming. And when explorers did reach these remote corners, They often found not perfection, but ordinary people living in extraordinary balance with their environment, a truth just as compelling as any myth. Yet the power of Shangri-La endures because it's more than a place, it's a mirror. In an era of climate crises and social fragmentation, the fantasy of a hidden haven resonates louder than ever. Modern searches for utopia have migrated from physical locations to digital realms, virtual communities promising harmony, or billionaires bankrolling biodomes as backups for civilization. The through line is clear. Whether in a Himalayan valley or a silicon server, we're still chasing the same ideal, but not all legends are born of light. For every Shangri-La, there's a darker counterpart, a cursed city, a haunted valley, a place where the rules of reality seem to warp, and that's where our journey turns next. That chill down your spine when you swear you saw something move in the shadows. What if it wasn't a ghost, but your own brain playing tricks on you? Neuroscience reveals that many paranormal experiences have startlingly ordinary explanations. Take sleep paralysis, that terrifying moment when you wake up unable to move, often accompanied by a crushing weight on your chest and visions of shadowy figures. Studies show this happens when REM sleep intrudes into wakefulness, leaving your brain half dreaming while your body stays frozen, a biological glitch that cultures worldwide interpret through their own folklore. In Japan, it's the kanashibari, bound by invisible ropes. In Newfoundland, it's the old hag pressing down. In Scandinavia, it's the Mara, a night demon. Same phenomenon, different stories, proof of how deeply culture shapes even our most visceral experiences. Then there's infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below 20 Hz, undetectable to human ears but felt as vibrations. Research from the 1990s found that certain frequencies can induce feelings of unease, nausea, or even the sensation of an unseen presence. When engineers traced mysterious hauntings in a UK laboratory to a faulty fan emitting infrasound, they replicated the effect intentionally. Volunteers reported chills, anxiety, and glimpses of grey figures in their peripheral vision. Suddenly, ghost sightings in ancient castles or creaky old houses take on new meaning. Could drafts or subsonic machinery be the real culprits? Our brains are also hardwired for pareidolia, the tendency to see faces in random patterns. fMRI scans show that when presented with ambiguous shapes, our visual cortex lights up as if recognizing human features, even when none exist. This explains why stains on walls become spectral faces, or why blurry photos spawn legends of apparitions. In 2014, researchers at a reportedly haunted hospital in England discovered that areas with high electromagnetic fields triggered similar brain activity in volunteers, creating illusions of shadowy figures where none stood. The supernatural often starts as the brain's desperate attempt to make sense of sensory noise, yet culture dictates what form these misinterpretations take. In Thailand, ghost stories often feature the Phai Tai Hong, spirits of those who died violently, while Mexican folklore tells of the weeping La Llorona. These variations aren't random, they reflect societal fears and values. When neuroscientists compared ghost narratives across 50 cultures, they found a striking pattern. Communities with stronger ancestor veneration traditions reported more benevolent spirits, while societies with high mortality rates leaned toward vengeful entities. Our beliefs don't just describe ghosts, they design them, stitching together biology and culture into something that feels undeniably real. This brings us to another realm where the mind bends reality, prophecy. From the oracle of Delphi to modern-day psychics, the allure of predicting the future taps into the same cognitive quirks that conjure ghosts: our hunger for patterns, our discomfort with uncertainty, and our brain's uncanny ability to retrofit meaning onto chaos. The Oracle of Delphi sat atop her tripod, breathing in vapors that rose from the earth as petitioners begged for glimpses of their future. What made her prophecies so compelling wasn't just their ambiguity, it was how they shaped the very events they predicted. When King Croesus of Lydia asked whether he should attack Persia, the oracle famously replied that if he did, a great empire would fall. Confident in his might, Croesus marched to war only to watch his own kingdom crumble. This wasn't mere trickery, it was the power of self-fulfilling prophecy in action. The oracle's words carried such authority that they influenced decisions, setting in motion the outcomes they seemed to merely foresee. Modern psychology recognizes this as the Oedipus effect, named after the tragic king who unknowingly fulfilled a prophecy by trying to avoid it. Leaders who consult psychics today aren't so different from ancient rulers seeking divine guidance. In both cases, the act of prediction alters behavior, bending reality toward the forecast. Nostradamus mastered another facet of prophetic illusion: vagueness. His 16th century quatrains, filled with poetic imagery about beasts and bloody moons, are often retrofitted to historical events. After 9/11, interpreters claimed he'd predicted the World Trade Center attacks with lines about sky fire and two brothers, but statistical analysis reveals the flaw in this thinking. With hundreds of vague verses, the odds that some phrase might coincidentally align with a later event are astonishingly high, a phenomenon called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where someone paints a target around a cluster of bullet holes to pretend they aimed perfectly. Nostradamus' prophecies work the same way. They're so flexible that believers cherry-pick matches while ignoring thousands of lines that never came to pass. Our brains are wired to amplify these false connections through apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data. This explains why people see prophecies in everything from Bible codes to supermarket receipts. During the 2012 Mayan apocalypse frenzy, every earthquake and political upheaval was interpreted as a sign of impending doom, even though Mayan scholars insisted the calendar simply marked the end of a cycle, not the world. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias, remembering hits, ignoring misses, and hindsight bias, rewriting memories to fit outcomes, further cement the illusion that prophecies are accurate. This dance between prediction and perception reaches its peak in alchemy, where the line between science and mysticism blurred. Alchemists didn't just seek to turn lead into gold. They believed the universe operated on hidden correspondences, where celestial events mirrored earthly transformations. When a comet streaked across the sky, it wasn't just an omen, it was a cosmic signal that the time was ripe for certain experiments. In this worldview, prophecy wasn't supernatural, it was about decoding nature's patterns. Modern chemistry has debunked their methods, but their core insight endures: the human drive to find order in chaos, to believe that if we look closely enough, the future might reveal itself before it arrives. Alchemy's greatest legacy isn't in failed attempts to manufacture gold, but in how it bridged myth and empiricism, a transition that would eventually birth modern science. Just as ancient oracles gave way to probability theory, alchemical symbols evolved into the periodic table, trading mystery for measurable elements. Yet even now, the allure of prophecy persists, proof that some myths aren't so much disproven as transformed. Alchemy wasn't just medieval pseudoscience, it was humanity's first daring attempt to crack the code of the universe. Picture a dimly lit workshop filled with bubbling flasks and cryptic symbols, where scholars believed the secrets of creation lay hidden in metals and minerals. Their goal: transmutation, turning base lead into glorious gold. To modern eyes, this seems like pure fantasy, but strip away the mysticism, and you'll find something astonishingly familiar: the roots of chemistry itself. Those early alchemists were pioneers, mixing observation with intuition, laying groundwork that would eventually evolve into the periodic table. What they lacked in precise tools, they made up for in relentless curiosity, documenting reactions and alloys with meticulous care. Even their failures were valuable, centuries of trial and error distilled into the scientific method we rely on today. The alchemist's dream of transmutation didn't vanish, it simply changed form. Fast forward to the 1930s, when physicists like Ernest Rutherford realized you could transform elements, not with elixirs but with particle accelerators. By bombarding atoms with neutrons, scientists achieved what alchemists only imagined, turning mercury into gold. The catch, it cost far more energy than the gold was worth. Yet this pursuit unlocked something far greater: nuclear fission, the process that powers both reactors and atomic bombs. The mythical philosopher's stone, once thought to grant eternal life, finds a faint echo in radioactive isotopes used today in cancer treatments, extending lives through science rather than sorcery. Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics, spent more time on alchemy than on gravity or optics. His secret manuscripts, filled with coded recipes and celestial diagrams, reveal a mind straddling two worlds. To Newton, alchemy wasn't superstition, it was a sacred science, a way to decode divine patterns in nature. His quest for the Mercury of philosophers wasn't just about metal, it was about uncovering universal laws hidden in the fabric of matter. In hindsight, we see how his alchemical obsession fueled his groundbreaking physics. The same drive to find order in chaos led him to calculus and the laws of motion, proving that even failed pursuits can illuminate unexpected truths. Alchemy's legacy lives on in language too. The word chemistry itself derives from alchemia, an Arabic term rooted in ancient Egyptian practices. Symbols like the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its tail, still resonate in modern science as a metaphor for cyclical reactions. And while we no longer believe in literal transmutation, quantum physics dances with similarly mind-bending ideas. Particles popping in and out of existence, matter and energy interchanging like alchemical equations. The difference: today's scientists wield equations instead of incantations, yet the wonder remains the same. This shift from mysticism to methodology mirrors another transformation: the way mythic heroes evolved from gods wielding lightning to scientists harnessing electricity. Both represent humanity's timeless urge to master the forces around us, whether through legend or lab work. And just as alchemy's symbols conceal deeper truths, so too do our modern myth stories of genius inventors and lone pioneers often hide the collaborative, messy reality of discovery. The real magic isn't in turning lead to gold, but in realizing how much of our modern world was dreamed up centuries ago by those who dared to imagine the impossible. Hercules wasn't just a demigod with superhuman strength, he was a canvas onto which ancient Greeks projected their deepest fears and greatest triumphs. His famous 12 labors read like a survival guide for Bronze Age Greece. Slaying the Nemean lion might symbolize overcoming predatory threats to livestock, while cleaning the Augean stables in a single day could reflect early hydraulic engineering to divert rivers and prevent disease. Even the Hydra, with its regenerating heads, mirrors the relentless challenges of marsh drainage, where cutting one channel risked creating new flooding elsewhere. These stories weren't mere entertainment. They were survival lessons wrapped in epic packaging, teaching resilience through metaphor. Archaeology hints at how real figures might have inspired such legends. In Turin's, a citadel linked to Hercules' myths, excavations reveal massive cyclopean walls, so named because later Greeks couldn't believe humans alone could move such stones. The same sites show evidence of repeated destruction and rebuilding, suggesting generations of leaders who rallied their people after earthquakes or invasions. Over centuries, their cumulative deeds could have fused into a single, superhuman figure. This biographical accumulation phenomenon appears globally. The Babylonian Gilgamesh likely amalgamated multiple Sumerian kings, while China's Yellow Emperor combines the achievements of several Neolithic innovators. Nowhere is this blurring of history and myth more tantalizing than with King Arthur. Medieval chronicles place him in the chaos of post-Roman Britain, a period so poorly documented that even his existence is debated. Yet archaeological finds like the 6th century Tintagel slate, inscribed with names resembling Artugnu, and the spectacular Sutton Hoo burial with its Byzantine treasures show a world where Romano-British leaders could indeed have wielded power worthy of legend. The sword Excalibur's mythic stone test for kingship may echo very real ceremonies where rulers proved their worth through physical ordeals, a practice seen in Germanic tribes' initiation rites. But heroes aren't the only elements of these tales that straddle reality. The monsters they battled often have roots in nature. Grendel from Beowulf, described as a shadow-stalking creature, shares traits with cave bears whose bones littered Scandinavian caverns. Medieval bestiaries filled with dragons might have drawn from Nile crocodile remains brought to Europe by crusaders, while the one-eyed cyclops could originate from dwarf elephant skulls found on Crete, their central nasal cavity resembling a giant eye socket. Paleontologists even speculate that griffin legends arose when Scythian nomads stumbled upon Protoceratops fossils in Mongolia's gold-rich sands. What makes these stories endure isn't just their drama, it's how they encode real human experiences. A hero's journey might compress generations of migration into a single quest, or turn a volcano's eruption into a dragon's wrath. The monsters represent nature's chaos, while the heroes embody our stubborn hope to tame it. And in that tension between the two, we find something timeless, the human struggle to make sense of a world far older and wilder than our stories can fully capture. In the muggy farmlands of Puerto Rico during the 1990s, terrified ranchers began finding their goats drained of blood, puncture wounds on their necks. The culprit, according to panicked whispers, was the chupacabra, a reptilian creature with glowing red eyes and a thirst for livestock. Eyewitnesses described something straight out of a horror movie, spines down its back, leathery skin, and a kangaroo-like posture. But when biologists examined the first supposed chupacabra carcasses, they found something far more ordinary: coyotes suffering from severe mange. The parasitic skin condition had left them hairless, their gaunt frames twisted into unnatural shapes by malnutrition. Here was nature's dark alchemy at work, a common predator transformed by disease into the stuff of nightmares. Yet the chupacabra didn't stay confined to mangy coyotes. Like a game of telephone spanning continents, the myth mutated with each retelling. In Mexico, it became a vampiric alien. In Texas, witnesses swore they'd seen a hairless, blue-skinned beast. This evolution wasn't accidental, it was fueled by the era's emerging pop culture. The creature's spike-backed silhouette mirrored the xenomorph from Alien, while its blood-drinking echoed vampire lore. Tabloid TV shows and early internet forums amplified the hysteria, stitching together disparate sightings into a cohesive monster mythos. Psychologists call this confabulation, when gaps in memory are unconsciously filled with borrowed details, creating a false but believable narrative. The chupacabra became a Rorschach test for collective anxiety, reflecting fears of everything from government experiments to ecological collapse. Social media didn't invent mass hysteria, it just gave it jet fuel. Before viral tweets, the 18th century, London Monster Panic saw dozens report attacks by a blade-wielding stalker who turned out to be pure fabrication. Similarly, the 19th century heirloom delusion had British officials convinced a secret machine was controlling minds with invisible rays. Today, platforms like TikTok and YouTube algorithmically feed our fascination with the unexplained, turning regional folklore into global phenomena overnight. A blurry video of a raccoon with mange in Tennessee can spark chupacabra theories from Manila to Moscow, while AI-generated images further blur the line between hoax and haunting. The result, a feedback loop where every new sighting reinforces the myth's plausibility, regardless of evidence. This cycle isn't new, it's ancient tech. 2,000 years ago, the Antikythera mechanism, an intricate Greek gearbox for tracking celestial events, was so advanced that many assumed it must be divine. Medieval automata, like the legendary brazen head of Albertus Magnus that could supposedly answer questions, sparked similar awe. These objects became myths because they defied contemporary understanding, just as cryptids exploit the edges of our scientific knowledge. The difference now is speed. Where rumors once crept along trade routes, they now ricochet globally in seconds. What links the chupacabra to these ancient marvels is humanity's hunger for wonder. We crave mysteries that push beyond the mundane, whether it's a hairless coyote transformed into a monster or a celestial calculator mistaken for godly handiwork. Both reveal the same truth. Our myths aren't just about the unknown, they're about us and how we navigate a world that's always one strange discovery away from rewriting reality. Ancient texts whisper of impossible machines, gods soaring in golden chariots across the sky, mechanical servants forged from bronze, even entire cities levitating by divine power. The Hindu Vedas describe Vimanas, fantastical flying palaces said to traverse the heavens with roaring engines, equipped with weapons eerily reminiscent of modern missiles. Over in ancient Greece, Homer's Iliad speaks of autonomous tripods serving ambrosia to the gods, while later writers like Hero of Alexandria sketched out real automated theater devices powered by steam. These stories straddle a tantalizing line. Could they be garbled accounts of lost technology or pure flights of imagination? The answer lies somewhere in between. Take the Antikythera mechanism, that astonishing clockwork device recovered from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. With its precise bronze gears tracking planetary movements and predicting eclipses, it proves ancient engineers were far more advanced than we often assume. Yet it wasn't magic. It was the product of centuries of Greek astronomical observation and Alexandrian craftsmanship. Similarly, Hero's steam-powered automata weren't robots in our sense, but clever applications of known physics. The gap between these real inventions and mythic exaggerations reveals something profound: how easily human memory stretches reality when retelling marvels across generations. This distortion isn't random. Cognitive scientists call it telescoping, when oral traditions compress or embellish events over time. A king's siege tower might become a flying fortress. A priest's mechanical oracle could morph into a talking statue. The same process turns historical figures into demigods or natural disasters into divine punishments. Consider the Minoan eruption that likely inspired Atlantis. What began as a traumatic memory of quakes and tsunamis became, over centuries, a parable about a punished civilization. Anachronisms creep in too. Medieval scribes illustrating Roman battles often drew knights in contemporary armor, just as modern UFO enthusiasts recast Vimanas as alien spacecraft. But why do these myths persist with such tenacity? Partly because they satisfy our hunger for hidden histories, the idea that ancestors knew secrets we've forgotten. This chronological snobbery cuts both ways. Ancient people weren't primitive, but they also didn't possess laser weapons or anti-gravity devices. The real marvel is how they achieved so much with so little, turning pulleys and levers into the building blocks of legend. That longing for lost knowledge fuels modern conspiracy theories too. From claims that the pyramids were built by aliens to insistence that Nikola Tesla discovered free energy, these narratives share a common thread: distrust of mainstream explanations and a romanticization of the past as somehow wiser or more advanced. Psychologists trace this to our discomfort with complexity. It's easier to believe in a single suppressed invention than the messy reality of incremental scientific progress. The irony in dismissing ancient ingenuity as too advanced to be human, we ironically undervalue their actual achievements like the Antikythera's gears or Damascus steel's metallurgy, which are remarkable precisely because they were born of observation and perseverance, not magic. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in what these stories omit. Vimana texts never mention runways or fuel logistics, just as Greek automata myths skip over maintenance and rust. Real technology leaves traces: workshops, failures, iterations. Myths unbound by physics soar effortlessly. That gap between the possible and the fantastical is where wonder lives, and where our ancestors, just like us, blurred the line between what they built and what they dreamed. The same psychological wiring that made our ancestors see gods in thunderstorms or dragons in dinosaur bones now shapes how we process modern conspiracy theories. At their core, these narratives follow the same blueprint as ancient myths, filling gaps in understanding with dramatic explanations that feel more satisfying than uncertainty. Take the flat Earth theory, which mirrors creation myths where the world rests on a giant turtle or serpent. Both frameworks offer a comforting sense of order, replacing the dizzying vastness of space or geological time with a tangible, if fictional, model. Even the moon landing hoax echoes age-old skepticism toward authority, just as some Bronze Age cultures distrusted royal astronomers predicting eclipses. Modern conspiracists dismiss NASA evidence as elite deception. Misinformation spreads today much like oral traditions once did, evolving with each retelling. A whispered rumor about vaccines in a Facebook group follows the same pattern as a medieval village exaggerating sightings of a werewolf. Details shift to fit fears of the moment. Researchers call this cultural contagion, where ideas mutate like viruses to survive in new environments. The 1969 moon landing, meticulously documented with rock samples and reflector arrays left on the lunar surface, somehow birthed a counter-narrative that NASA staged everything on a soundstage. This myth-making process mirrors how Homer's Iliad transformed a localized Bronze Age conflict into a saga of divine intervention over centuries of retelling. The difference: modern myths can go global in hours, turbocharged by algorithms that prioritize engagement over accuracy. Debunking these theories requires more than facts; it demands an understanding of mythic psychology. Cognitive scientists find that simply presenting evidence often backfires, reinforcing believers' convictions. Instead, techniques like debunking, exposing people to weakened forms of misinformation before they encounter it, work like intellectual vaccines. Historians note parallels to ancient Athenian ostracism, where citizens would scratch names on pottery shards to exile those spreading dangerous rumors. Today's fact-checkers play a similar role, though their tools include forensic photo analysis and orbital mechanics tutorials proving the moon landings weren't fake. The future of myth research lies at this crossroads of neuroscience and anthropology. Cutting-edge tools like fMRI scans reveal how our brains process extraordinary claims. The same regions that light up during religious experiences activate when conspiracy theorists encounter proof of their beliefs. Meanwhile, AI models trained on millennia of folklore can predict how modern myths might evolve, identifying narrative patterns that make some stories stick while others fade. Projects like the Cultural Evolution Society now track rumors spread with the same rigor biologists used to study ecosystems, recognizing that ideas obey their own Darwinian rules. What emerges is a startling realization. The line between myth and misinformation isn't about truth, but about function. Just as flood myths helped ancient cultures process trauma, QAnon's sprawling narrative offers adherents a sense of purpose in a chaotic world. The challenge isn't just correcting falsehoods, but addressing the human needs that myths, ancient or modern, have always fulfilled. As we hurtle into an era of deepfakes and generative AI, understanding these age-old storytelling instincts may be our best defense against the next wave of digital folklore. After all, the most enduring myths aren't about the past. They're roadmaps to how we'll navigate an uncertain future. Imagine an AI so advanced it could sift through every myth ever recorded across hundreds of languages and millennia, spotting hidden patterns invisible to human researchers. That future isn't as far off as you might think. Right now, machine learning algorithms are already analyzing ancient texts, cross-referencing flood myths from Mesopotamia with geological data, or mapping the migration of dragon legends along prehistoric trade routes. These systems don't just compare stories, they decode them, identifying how details shift as tales travel from oral traditions to written records, or how climate events like volcanic eruptions might have inspired tales of angry gods. One project at Stanford trained an AI on thousands of global creation myths, revealing startling similarities between cultures that had no contact, hinting at shared human instincts rather than shared history. But the real game changer could be virtual reality. Museums are experimenting with VR reconstructions of legendary events like the eruption of Thera that might have birthed the Atlantis myth, or the celestial alignments at Stonehenge during solstices. Soon, you could stand in a digitally recreated Troy as scholars debate whether Homer's descriptions match the archaeology, or witness the Norse Ragnarök saga with visuals informed by ice core samples from the period. These aren't just fancy animations, they're hypothesis-testing tools. By immersing in these environments, researchers can ask new questions. Does the layout of Knossos really evoke a labyrinth? Could the pillar of fire in Exodus narratives describe an actual volcanic plume visible from Sinai? Yet with these breakthroughs come ethical quandaries. What happens when AI concludes that a sacred story, like the Maori's navigational myths or the Dreamtime tales of Aboriginal Australians, has roots in a forgotten historical event? Communities whose identities are intertwined with these narratives might resist having them explained by algorithms, and who gets to decide which version of a myth gets reconstructed in VR? The Cherokee story of the Octina serpent varies wildly between clans. Freezing one interpretation in digital form risks erasing that diversity. Some scholars argue myth-busting can be a form of cultural imperialism, stripping stories of their spiritual weight by reducing them to data points. The most exciting and unsettling possibility: AI might start generating new myths. Researchers feeding folklore databases into generative models have already produced eerily plausible stories blending Slavic and Aztec motifs. These aren't just random mashups, they follow the same narrative structures our ancestors used, revealing universal templates for hero journeys or origin tales. It raises a provocative question. Are we nearing a time when machines can dream up legends as compelling as those that shaped civilizations? As we peer into this high-tech crystal ball, one thing becomes clear: the science of myth isn't just about uncovering the past, it's about redefining how we tell stories in the future. And that brings us to our final revelation, one that ties all these threads together in a way that might just change how you see every legend you've ever heard. There's a delicate tension between preserving cultural heritage and pursuing scientific truth, like walking a tightrope between respect and revelation. For many indigenous communities, myths aren't just stories. They're living traditions, sacred maps of identity and connection to the land. When researchers analyze these narratives as mere artifacts or attempt to debunk them with geological data or genetic studies, it can feel like reducing a symphony to sheet music. The Maori, for instance, view their oral histories as taonga, treasures passed down through generations. To suggest that their accounts of arriving in Aotearoa are just metaphors for migration patterns risks erasing the spiritual and emotional dimensions that science can't quantify. Yet ignoring the potential historical kernels in these stories can also mean overlooking valuable clues about human resilience, environmental adaptation, and even forgotten technologies. The key lies in collaboration, not conquest. In Canada's Haida Gwaii archipelago, archaeologists and Haida elders now work side by side, blending sonar scans with oral histories to locate ancient village sites submerged by rising seas. The elders' stories, once dismissed as folklore, guided researchers to pinpoint areas where technology alone might have missed subtle clues. Similarly, in Australia, Aboriginal rangers partner with paleontologists, using dreamtime narratives to identify fossil-rich sites. These partnerships recognize that science and myth aren't adversaries. They're complementary lenses for understanding the past. The Navajo Nation's recent collaboration with NASA is another striking example. When the agency's Lunar Prospector mission carried ashes of astronaut Eugene Shoemaker to the moon in 1998, Navajo leaders protested, citing sacred traditions about lunar reverence. 2 decades later, NASA consulted Navajo scholars before the 2024 Viper Moon rover mission, ensuring cultural protocols were honored while pursuing scientific goals. Respectful study requires rethinking how we frame discoveries. Instead of declaring a myth disproven, researchers might ask, what real events or observations could have inspired this story? When geneticists traced Polynesians' epic voyages across the Pacific, they didn't dismiss Maui's legendary fishhook that pulled up islands as fantasy. They explored how celestial navigation and ocean currents might have been encoded in metaphor. In West Africa, historians examining the Mali Empire's accounts of flying ships found plausible links to elaborate masquerade gliders used in ceremonies, revealing how technology and legend intertwined. This approach doesn't strip myths of their power, it deepens our appreciation for the ingenuity behind them. The debate isn't about choosing between science and tradition, it's about recognizing that both are human attempts to make sense of the world, just with different vocabularies. When a Tlingit elder describes ravens stealing the sun, and a physicist explains solar fusion, they're circling the same awe-inspiring mystery from different angles. Perhaps the real lesson lies in humility. Science, for all its precision, is constantly revising itself, just as oral traditions evolve with each telling. Both are works in progress, and both deserve room to breathe. As we near the end of this exploration, one thing becomes clear. The most enduring myths aren't those that resist scrutiny, but those that invite it, stories flexible enough to hold both ancient wisdom and modern insight. They remind us that truth isn't always a single point on a map, but sometimes the entire landscape, seen from countless vantage points. And in that vast terrain, there's space for wonder to thrive alongside understanding. Myths are far more than relics of ancient storytelling. They are the invisible architecture of our modern world. shaping everything from personal identity to scientific discovery. Consider how origin stories, whether the Dreamtime narratives of Aboriginal Australians or the Norse creation myth of Ymir, provide communities with a sense of rootedness, connecting the present to a grander tapestry of meaning. These tales aren't just entertainment, they're psychological anchors, helping individuals navigate their place in the universe. Even today, people turn to superhero myths or dystopian sagas to process collective anxieties, proving that the need for narrative frameworks hasn't faded, it's simply evolved. Science itself owes a debt to myth. Early astronomers like Johannes Kepler were inspired by Pythagorean harmonies and celestial myths, seeing in them a hidden order to the cosmos. The periodic table's very structure echoes alchemical quests to categorize elements, while terms like genome editing carry whispers of Promethean ambition. Myths also serve as cautionary tales in ethics debates. The story of Icarus warns of unchecked technological hubris, a lesson revisited in discussions about artificial intelligence or climate engineering. Far from opposing science, myths often provide the imaginative scaffolding that fuels inquiry, framing questions before tools exist to answer them. Art and media are saturated with mythic DNA. From Star Wars' hero's journey to the environmental allegories in Studio Ghibli films, storytellers continue to recycle ancient archetypes because they resonate on a primal level. Marvel's Thor and DC's Wonder Woman aren't just comic book characters, they're modern deities, repackaging Norse and Greek mythology for an age of CGI. Even video games like God of War or Assassin's Creed blend historical research with mythic storytelling, creating immersive worlds where players grapple with moral dilemmas straight from epic traditions. This enduring appeal reveals a universal truth. Myths are humanity's oldest virtual reality, simulating life's complexities in digestible narratives. The most powerful myths operate as collective memory, preserving trauma and triumph across generations. Holocaust memorials draw on biblical Exodus imagery, while civil rights movements invoke the Underground Railroad as a modern-day odyssey. These narratives aren't just history lessons, they're moral compasses, encoding values like resilience and justice. Psychological studies show that communities with strong mythic traditions recover faster from disasters, as stories provide templates for survival and hope. The Maori Wakapapa system, which weaves genealogy into land and myth, has even guided ecological restoration, proving that these frameworks can address contemporary crises. Blending science and myth isn't about choosing one over the other. It's about recognizing their synergy. Indigenous fire management practices, once dismissed as primitive rituals, are now revolutionizing forestry with their nuanced understanding of landscape cycles. Similarly, the placebo effect demonstrates how belief, a cousin to myth, can trigger measurable biological changes. The lesson here isn't that myths are true in a literal sense, but that they contain encoded wisdom distilled through centuries of human experience. As we stand at the crossroads of AI and genetic engineering, we're crafting new myths in real time. Stories about neural immortality or Martian colonies that may one day seem as quaint as flying chariots. The challenge isn't to outgrow myth, but to wield it wisely, balancing wonder with wisdom. After all, every scientific revolution begins with a question, and every question starts with a story. The myths we create today will shape the discoveries of tomorrow, just as the old ones guided us here. From the bones of ancient creatures mistaken for dragons to the floods that echo through sacred texts, our journey through myth and science reveals something extraordinary. These stories were never just fiction. They were humanity's first experiments in understanding a world far stranger than our ancestors could have imagined. The same skulls that inspired Cyclops legends now sit in museums, their true origins known, yet the wonder they sparked remains. Ancient deluges that shaped religions from Mesopotamia to the Andes have been mapped by geologists, proving that oral traditions often carried kernels of truth across millennia. Even the stars that guided sailors and inspired gods now charted by satellites still hold mysteries we're only beginning to unravel. What ties these discoveries together isn't just the thrill of debunking or confirming legends, it's the delicate dance between imagination and evidence. Skepticism keeps us grounded, but wonder propels us forward. When paleontologists realized Protoceratops fossils might have birthed the griffin myth, it didn't diminish the legend. It revealed how observation and storytelling once shared the same breath. Similarly, learning that the Oracle of Delphi's trances came from ethylene gas doesn't strip her prophecies of meaning. It shows how humans have always sought to bridge the seen and unseen. The physicist Carl Sagan once wrote, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known." That's the heart of why these myths endure. They remind us that curiosity is our compass, whether we're decoding ancient texts or scanning the cosmos. So the next time you hear a fantastical tale, whether it's a local ghost story or a viral conspiracy, ask yourself, what real observation, what fragment of history might be hidden in its folds? And what might it reveal about the human need to explain, to connect, to marvel? If these explorations have sparked your curiosity, there's so much more to uncover. Hit subscribe to join us as we keep peeling back the layers of history's greatest mysteries, because the most captivating story of all is still being written, not by mythmakers or scientists alone, but by all of us as we keep asking, what if?